A young man walked into the Mercer County Courthouse on a Tuesday morning in late August carrying a leather briefcase that was older than he was. His shirt was ironed but not new. His shoes were clean but worn at the heel. He was 24 years old, lean, quiet, with the kind of stillness that made people look twice without knowing why. The woman at the security desk glanced up, looked him over once, and went back to her phone. Nobody stopped him. Nobody greeted him. Nobody asked if he needed help. That was fine. He did not need help. He needed a courtroom. His name was Andre Lewis. And before that afternoon was over, he was going to ask one question that would end the career of the most powerful judge in Mercer County, South Carolina. But nobody in that building knew that yet. I am going to tell you something before we go any further. I have been covering stories of injustice in this country for 11 years. I have sat across from people who lost everything, people who fought back, people who won and people who did not. I have heard a lot of stories. This one stopped me cold, not because of what happened in that courtroom, because of what had to happen first, because of everything a family had to survive just to get to that door. Stay with me, because the part that matters most is not the ending. It is the 22 years that came before it. Mercer, South Carolina. Population 8,430. One main street, a hardware store, 2 barbershops, a diner that had been there since 1961, and a courthouse built from red brick and old money that sat at the center of town like it owned everything around it, which, in a way, it did. If you drove through Mercer on a Sunday afternoon, you might call it peaceful. You might notice the magnolia trees lining the road, the American flags on every porch, the old men sitting outside the feed store with coffee cups in their hands. You might think this was the kind of place where nothing bad happened. You would be wrong. There was a line in Mercer that did not appear on any map. You could not see it from the road, but everyone who lived there knew exactly where it was. It ran east to west, roughly along the old railroad tracks, and it divided the town into 2 different worlds. North of the line, the roads were smooth, the schools were funded, the code inspectors never came. South of the line, the potholes stayed for years. The buildings aged without repair, and a company called Crestfield Development Group had been buying up land, block by block, for the better part of a decade. Crestfield did not knock on doors and make offers. Not at first. First came the code violations, then the tax reassessments, then the lawsuits. And every single time a black family tried to fight back, every single time a case was filed, it landed on the same desk, the desk of Judge Raymond Holt. Holt had been on the bench for 22 years. He was 61 years old, white, 3rd-generation Mercer. His grandfather had been a county commissioner. His father had been a circuit court judge. In Mercer County, the Holt name did not just carry weight, it was the weight. No attorney in the county would challenge him openly. No ruling of his had ever been overturned on appeal. And if you were black and standing in his courtroom without a very expensive lawyer, the verdict was written before you opened your mouth. Everyone in Mercer knew this. Nobody said it out loud. The last person who did, a black attorney named Marcus Webb, who filed a judicial conduct complaint in 2017, found his office lease suddenly terminated, his bar association dues mysteriously flagged for audit, and his most important client reassigned to another firm. The message was clear. In Mercer County, justice had a price, and most people could not afford it. On the south side of that invisible lines, at a small auto repair shop with a hand-painted sign that read Keanu & Sons Garage. The paint was fading at the edges. The parking lot had cracks running through it like old scars. But inside, the tools were organized with military precision. The floors were swept every night, and a framed photograph of a woman with a wide, warm smile hung on the wall near the register. That woman was Andre's mother. She had been gone for 6 years. Keanu Lewis was a quiet man who fixed engines the way a surgeon fixes hearts, carefully, patiently, with hands that knew exactly what they were doing. He had bought this land with his wife 19 years ago, back when they were young and full of plans. The garage was everything he had left of her. It was Andre's inheritance. It was the last piece of a life that illness had taken, piece by piece, dollar by dollar. He was behind on property taxes, not because he was careless, because his wife's cancer treatments had swallowed every savings account, every emergency fund, every dollar set aside for the future. And now, with the garage barely breaking even, the notices had started arriving. On the wall behind the register, next to the photograph, hung a framed document, a property deed. Keanu would point to it sometimes and say, "This paper means they cannot take what is ours." He believed that. He had to. Now let me tell you about Andre. He was 24 years old and in his final semester at the University of South Carolina School of Law. He had come home for the summer to help his father with the books, the filings, the paperwork that Keanu had never been comfortable with. Andre was quiet in the way that serious people are quiet, not shy. Precise. He listened more than he spoke. He wrote things down. He had carried a notebook since he was a teenager, a worn spiral-bound notebook with a blue cover, and he filled it with names, dates, case numbers, details that other people let slide past them. He had also, in the spring of his third year of law school, completed a 6-month internship at the office of the South Carolina Attorney General, working in the Civil Rights Division. He had not told his father about this. He had not told anyone in Mercer. He had come home in a used 2014 Honda Civic with a broken air conditioner and a briefcase that had belonged to his grandfather, and he looked, to everyone who saw him, like exactly what he appeared to be, a young man helping his dad. Nobody in that courthouse knew what he was carrying. The papers arrived on a Thursday. Andre was at the kitchen table reviewing a contracts outline when his father walked in from the garage holding a thick envelope, his hands still black with grease. He set it on the table and looked at it the way a man looks at something he already knows is bad news. Crestfield Development Group was suing to claim a portion of the Lewis property. The lawsuit alleged that the western boundary of the garage encroached on a parcel Crestfield had recently acquired from the neighboring Dawson family. The company demanded that Keanu vacate the disputed strip within 60 days. If he refused, they would seek forced removal and financial damages. 60 days, 19 years on this land, 60 days to disappear. Keanu read the first page, then the second. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then his hands began to shake. Andre took the papers from him gently. He read every word, every clause, every citation. His jaw tightened, his eyes moved faster. When he finished, he set the papers down on the table and was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I need to make some calls." Over the next 10 days, Keanu visited every attorney he could find. The first one, a man with a golf trophy on his desk and a framed photo of himself shaking hands with a state senator, told Keanu it was a losing case. "You are going up against Crestfield in Holt's courtroom," he said. "That is not a trial. That is a formality." The second charged a $12,000 retainer just to review the file. Keanu did not have $12,000. He barely had $1,200. The third, a black attorney named Dennis Crawford who practiced out of a small office in the next town over, leaned forward and spoke quietly. "Mr. Lewis, I took a case against Crestfield once. Holt dismissed it in 38 minutes. After that, my landlord raised my rent by 40%. A client I had worked with for 7 years suddenly switched firms. I am sorry. I want to help. But going against Holt in this county is not just a case. It is a sentence." Andre was in the back seat for every single visit. He said nothing, but his notebook was open on his lap and his pen never stopped moving. He was building a map of how power worked in Mercer County. How one man's name could make 3 attorneys turn away a father who had done nothing wrong. The following Sunday, the family gathered at Grandma Ruth's house for dinner. The table was crowded. Collard greens, cornbread, sweet tea in mason jars. But the mood was heavy. Everyone had heard about the lawsuit. Neighbors whispered. 2 families on the block had already sold to Crestfield under pressure. A third was packing. Ruth Adams was 73 years old, a retired school teacher. And she sat at the head of the table and listened to the adults talk about what could not be done. She let them finish. Then she said, "They smile at you while they steal from you. That is how it has always been. Different names, same hands." The room went quiet. Then she said something else. Something she did not think twice about. Something that would change everything. "You know," she said, spooning greens onto Andre's plate, "when Crestfield bought the Dawson place, the survey markers moved overnight. I saw it with my own eyes. One day, the marker was by my fence post. Next morning, it was 3 feet east. 3 feet, like magic. Bad magic." Andre's pen stopped. He looked up. "What do you mean they moved?" Ruth waved her hand. "I mean what I mean, baby. One day here, next day there. Nobody explains nothing to old women." Andre did not say another word for the rest of dinner, but under the table, in his notebook, he circled one word 3 times. Moo. That night, the light in his room stayed on past midnight, past 1, past 2 in the morning. The lawsuit papers were spread across the desk. The original property deed was propped against the lamp. Andre was drawing lines on graph paper with colored pencils, comparing boundaries, tracing coordinates. His finger traced to different lines, one from the original deed, one from the survey Crestfield had submitted with the lawsuit. They did not match. He pulled up the county records he had requested earlier that week from the Mercer County clerk's office. A young clerk named Diane Foster had pulled the files for him. Without a word, looking at the request form he had filled out completely incorrectly, and then looking at him with an expression that said, "Finally, someone is looking." He cross-referenced the original county plat survey from 19 years ago against the boundary survey submitted by Crestfield surveyor, a man named Gerald Sutton, licensed for 29 years, with a long list of credentials and a longer list of clients that all seemed to connect back to the same development companies. The numbers did not line up. Sutton's survey used a GPS reference point that was offset from the original county monument. Not by accident, by exactly 14 feet. 14 feet to the east. Just enough to place the western wall of the garage on Crestfield's newly acquired land. Andre checked the survey Sutton had conducted for the Dawson property the previous year. Same surveyor, same offset, same direction, same result. 2 properties, same man, same shift, same company, same outcome. This was not a mistake. This was a method. He wrote in his notebook, "Sutton moved the line. He moved it for the Dawsons. Now he is moving it for us." But that was not the discovery that made his hands shake. The discovery that made his hands shake came 20 minutes later. Andre had requested the Mercer County financial disclosure records along with the property files. Every elected and appointed official in the county was required to file these annually. They were public record, available to any citizen who asked. Most people never asked. He was flipping through Judge Raymond Holt's most recent disclosure when he found it. A single line on page 11. Investment interest, Crestfield Development Group LLC. Shares acquired. Value $192,000. He read it again, and again, and one more time. Judge Raymond Holt, the man assigned to preside over Crestfield's case against the Lewis family, was an investor in Crestfield Development Group. He held a direct financial stake in the very company that was suing Andre's father. Every piece of land Crestfield acquired made Holt richer. Every ruling in Crestfield's favor put money directly in Holt's pocket. The judge was not neutral. The judge was the enemy. And it was all written down, filed with the county, public record, sitting in a filing cabinet for years, waiting for someone to simply look. No attorney had looked. No journalist had looked. No politician had looked. Andre Lewis looked. He sat at his desk for a long time. His hands were not shaking from fear. They were shaking from understanding. He finally understood why every black family lost in Holt's courtroom, why no attorney would take their cases, why the system worked so perfectly, so consistently, so completely against them. It was not just bias. It was profit. He picked up an index card. He wrote one question on it. He underlined it twice. He placed it in the front pocket of his grandfather's briefcase. That night, a 24-year-old law student held the most powerful man in Mercer County in the palm of his hand. And Holt had no idea. "I need to stop here, because I want you to understand something." Andre Lewis was not a lawyer yet. He had no bar license. He had no courtroom experience. He had no money, no connections, no powerful friends. He had a notebook, a stack of law books, 6 months of experience in an attorney general's office that nobody in Mercer knew about, and a question written on a 3x5 index card. That was all. And he was about to walk into a courtroom where the judge had spent 22 years making sure people like his father never won. Think about that for a moment, then keep listening. The morning of the hearing, mist sat low over the garage. The sign was visible through the kitchen window. Still faded, still standing. Keanu wore his best suit, the one from his wife's funeral. Andre wore a clean white shirt, sleeves pressed, collar straight. Neither spoke much over breakfast. At the front door, Keanu put both hands on his son's shoulders. "Whatever happens in there, I am proud of you." Andre looked at his father. "Nothing is going to happen, Dad, except the truth." They drove through town in silence, past the diner, past the church where Andre's mother was buried, past a Crestfield Development billboard advertising luxury townhomes. The future of Mercer. Andre looked at it. His grip on the briefcase tightened. The courthouse lobby was cool and marble-floored. A security guard waved Andre through without looking up. A group of attorneys in expensive suits stood near the elevator, talking and laughing. One of them glanced at Andre, took in the worn briefcase, the young face, the absence of a firm name on any visible document, and looked away. At the respondent's table in Courtroom C, Andre set down the briefcase and opened it. He laid out his index cards in a neat row. He placed one folder to the left and one to the right. He sat down, hands folded, and waited. The opposing counsel was a woman named Patricia Sloan. She was 47 years old, sharp, polished, unhurried. She had represented Crestfield in 11 cases in Mercer County. She had won all 11. She walked in, set her briefcase on the table, glanced at Andre, and then looked again, more slowly this time. She leaned over to the Crestfield representative beside her and said something quietly. They both looked at Andre. The Crestfield representative smiled. Judge Raymond Holt entered at 9:47 in the morning. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, with silver hair and the kind of face that had spent decades being agreed with. He settled into his chair, adjusted his robe, and looked out at the courtroom. His eyes landed on Andre. "Who are you and what are you doing at counsel's table?" Andre stood. "My name is Andre Lewis, Your Honor. I am here on behalf of my father, Keanu Lewis, the respondent in this matter. I am a third-year law student currently completing my final semester. Under South Carolina, a rule of civil procedure in the court's inherent authority to ensure access to justice. I am requesting permission to assist my father in presenting his case, as he is unable to afford licensed representation." He held up a written motion, clean, precise. Every citation correct. Holt took the document. He read it. His jaw shifted. He flipped the page, read the citations, flipped back. Something moved behind his eyes. Not respect. Something harder to name. The first faint recognition that this was not what he had expected. "Who helped you write this?" "The University of South Carolina Law Library, Your Honor. It is open to everyone." A few people in the gallery smiled. Holt did not. "I will allow it," he said, his voice flat. "Provisionally. One misstep and you are done. Understood?" "Understood, Your Honor." Patricia Sloan delivered her opening statement like a woman who had already won. She was smooth, polished, and every sentence was designed to make the Lewis family look like they were clinging to a mistake. She presented Crestfield as a pillar of the community, a company investing in Mercer's future, creating jobs, raising property values. The boundary survey was conducted by a licensed professional with 29 years of experience. The law was clear. The math was clear. The line was the line. "This is not about history," she said, straightening her jacket. "This is not about sentiment. This is about where a line is drawn on a map, and the map is clear." She sat down. She did not look at Andre. Andre stood. "My father has owned this land for 19 years. That is longer than most of the people in this room have worked at their current jobs. My mother is buried in the church 2 blocks from our garage. The deed on our wall has been valid for nearly 2 decades. Nobody questioned it. Nobody challenged it. Not until Crestfield Development decided they wanted it. He paused. Miss Sloane says this is about a line on a map. She's right. But the question is not where the line is. The question is who moved it. And why. The courtroom went still. Not the polite stillness of waiting. The electric stillness of people realizing something had shifted. Sloane moved to cross-examine Keanu. She started gently. How long had he owned the property? Where had he grown up? Simple questions. Then the blade came out. She asked if he was a surveyor. No. A licensed engineer. No. Had he ever studied property law? No. Had he ever read his full deed before this lawsuit arrived? Keanu hesitated. I read most of it when we bought the land. Most of it, Sloane repeated. So you are asking this court to take your word? A man with no legal training, no surveying credentials, no formal education beyond a trade certificate, over the assessment of a 29-year licensed professional. Keanu sat up straight. He looked at her steadily. I am asking this court to look at the truth. Andre watched from his seat. His jaw was tight. He wrote a note on one of his index cards. He knew exactly what Sloane was doing. He stayed seated. He stayed silent. His pen moved across the card because he had something bigger coming. Something Sloane did not know about. Something Holt did not know about. Something sitting in the front pocket of an old leather briefcase, written on a 3x5 index card, underlined twice. One question. That was all he needed. Holt called a recess for lunch, but before the gavel came down, he leaned forward and looked directly at Andre. Young man, I have given you more latitude today than this proceeding requires. When we return this afternoon, I expect evidence. Real evidence. Documents, numbers, facts. Not speeches, not feelings. If you do not have something concrete to show me, I will rule on what is in front of me. And what is in front of me is a licensed survey and a valid claim. Are we clear? Yes, Your Honor. Good. Recess until 1:30. Sloane gathered her papers and smiled. Not the tight smile of someone performing confidence. The real smile of someone who believed she had already won. She leaned over to the Crestfield representative and they both shook their heads slightly, a small dismissive gesture of people who have stopped taking something seriously. Holt stepped down from the bench and disappeared through the side door. In the hallway, Keanu sat on a wooden bench and put his head in his hands. He did not speak. His body said everything. The curve of his back, the way his fingers pressed into his temples, the slow shake of his head. 19 years of work, his wife's memory, his son's future. All of it balanced on a hearing that felt like it was already deciding. Andre stood at the hallway window, looking out at the town. The rooftops, the church steeple, the Crestfield billboard in the distance. For the first time since this began, something cracked in his composure. Just slightly. His hand trembled as he held the briefcase strap. He looked for a moment, like exactly what he was. A young man carrying something too heavy for anyone his age. Then he opened the briefcase. He pulled out the index card from the front pocket. He read it silently, lips moving once, twice. His breathing slowed. His hands steadied. His face went calm. He was ready. That was when Holt appeared in the hallway. Not in his robe, just his shirt and suspenders. He walked toward Andre slowly, deliberately, his shoes clicking on the marble floor. He stopped a few feet away and looked at the young man with an expression that was almost friendly, almost warm. The expression of a man who had been doing this for 22 years and knew exactly how it ended. You have got nerve. I will give you that. His voice was low, almost conversational. But nerve does not win cases in my courtroom. You know what wins? Knowing when you have already lost. He let that settle. Tell your father to take whatever Crestfield offers. Save yourself the embarrassment. Save him the embarrassment. Andre looked at Judge Raymond Holt, the man who had spent 22 years deciding who mattered and who did not, and said, I do not have a counteroffer, Judge Holt. I have a question. Holt's smile did not disappear, but it thinned, just at the corners. The smallest crack in the armor of a man who had not been genuinely challenged into decades. He turned and walked away without another word. Outside the courthouse, under the old oak tree in the yard. Several families from the south side of Mercer had gathered. Ruth was among them. She was not crying. She was sitting on a bench with her eyes closed and her hands clasped, praying. Not loudly, not for show, just a grandmother asking God to steady the hands of a young man, carrying a briefcase full of truth into a room full of people who wanted to crush him. A neighbor put her hand on Ruth's shoulder. "He has no chance in there, Ruth. You know that." Ruth opened her eyes, slow and certain. That boy has been preparing for this his whole life. He just did not know it until now. Diane Foster, the county records clerk who had pulled those files, was watching from the courthouse steps. She had not gone to lunch. She was too nervous to eat. She knew what Andre had found in those records. She had watched him read page 11 of Holt's financial disclosure, watched his eyes go wide, watched him copy the numbers into his notebook with hands that shook. She had said nothing. She had done her job. She had given a citizen access to public record, and now she was hoping it was enough. The courthouse bell rang. Andre tucked in his shirt. He picked up the briefcase with both hands. Keanu stood. They looked at each other, the father and the son, and walked back through the courthouse doors together, side by side, step by step. When that door closed for the afternoon session, every person in that gallery held their breath, because a 24-year-old law student with no bar license and no courtroom experience was about to do something that no attorney, no politician, and no adult in Mercer County had ever dared to do. Look Judge Raymond Holt in the eye and call him a fraud. The afternoon session began with the kind of silence that presses against your chest. The gallery was fuller than before. Word had spread during the recess. People were standing along the back wall, faces pressed against the window of the courtroom door. Families from the south side who had come because the Lewis case was their case too. If Keanu lost, they all lost, and they knew it. Andre stood and said, "Your Honor, I would like to call a witness." Holt raised an eyebrow. "You have a witness?" "Yes, sir, Jarlson, the licensed surveyor who conducted the boundary assessment filed by Crestfield Development." Sloan was on her feet immediately. "Objection. Mr. Sutton is our witness." Holt looked at Andre. For a moment, he seemed ready to deny it. One more way to tilt the floor. But the gallery was watching. A clerk was recording. So he said, "The respondent has a right to cross-examine." Overruled. Gerald Sutton took the stand. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s, with a receding hairline and sweat already forming at his temples. He sat down, adjusted the microphone, and looked at Andre with the expression of a man who had not expected to be questioned seriously. Andre began gently. "Mr. Sutton, how long have you been a licensed surveyor?" 29 years. "And you conducted the boundary survey submitted in this case?" "I did." "Could you walk me through your process? Specifically, where did you begin your measurement?" Sutton relaxed. This was his territory. "I started from the GPS coordinates of the county reference marker on the northwest corner of the Crestfield parcel." "Standard procedure." "Standard procedure," Andre repeated. He nodded. "Let Sutton feel comfortable. Let him settle in." Then Andre reached into the briefcase and pulled out two transparent sheets. Hand-drawn overlays on clear plastic, traced from the documents he had studied for 3 nights straight. One showed the original county plat survey from 19 years ago. The other showed Sutton's survey. He held them up, one on top of the other, and walked toward the witness stand. "Mr. Sutton, in the original plat recorded with this county 19 years ago, the reference monument on the northwest corner is located at this position." He pointed. "But in your survey, the starting GPS coordinate is here." He pointed again. "That is approximately 14 feet to the east. Can you explain why your starting point does not match the original?" Sutton blinked. "It was updated." "Updated by whom?" "The coordinates I used were the most current available." "Do you have documentation of that update from the county surveyor's office?" Silence. Sutton's mouth opened, then closed. "I would have to check my records." "I checked them for you," Andre said. He held up a printed page. The county's confirmation letter, stamped and dated. "There has been no update to the reference monument coordinates for this parcel since the original plat was filed. The county confirmed it in writing. The marker has not moved in 19 years. Sutton shifted in his chair. The sweat at his temples was running now. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. Andre let the silence hold. 3 seconds. 4. 5. He had learned this from Ruth. Silence is a weapon, she had told him. Let the lie sit in the air. Let everyone smell it. Then he placed both overlay sheets on the table and pulled out the index card from the front pocket of the briefcase. One question, written in careful block letters, underlined twice. Mr. Sutton, I have one more question. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the ceiling fan turning above the bench. I also obtained the survey you conducted for the Dawson property. The land Crestfield Development purchased last year. Same county, same neighborhood, same client. He paused. In that survey, the reference point is offset from the original monument by the same distance. 14 feet, same direction. East, same result. The boundary shifts in Crestfield's favor. Sutton said nothing. His hand gripped the armrest so hard his knuckles went white. To properties. Same surveyor, same offset, same client, same outcome. Andre looked directly at Sutton. His voice did not waver. Mr. Sutton, did Crestfield Development or anyone acting on their behalf instruct you to use a shifted reference point for these surveys? Yes or no? Sutton's eyes darted to Sloan. Then, involuntarily, helplessly, they darted to Judge Holt. That single glance said everything. The connection between the surveyor, the company, and the judge lay bare in one terrified look. I was given coordinates to work from, Sutton said finally. Given by whom? By the client's office. The gallery erupted. Voices overlapping. Someone shouted. Sloan was on her feet objecting. Holt banged the gavel. Order. Order in this court. But Andre was not finished. He waited for the noise to die. He stood perfectly still. The briefcase was open on the table behind him. The index card was still in his hand. Then he did something nobody expected. He turned away from Sutton. He turned toward the bench. He looked up at Judge Raymond Holt, the most powerful man in Mercer County, the man who had spent 22 years deciding who belonged and who did not. And Andre Lewis, 24 years old, no bar license, worn shoes, grandfather's briefcase, asked the question that no one in that courtroom saw coming. Your Honor, before you rule on this case, I have one final question. Not for the witness, for the record. Holt's face tightened. You are out of order. According to the Mercer County Financial Disclosure Records, public records filed annually, available to any citizen who requests them, you, Judge Raymond Holt, hold an investment interest in Crestfield Development Group valued at $192,000. The courtroom stopped breathing. If that is accurate, Your Honor, then you have a direct financial interest in the outcome of every case Crestfield brings before this court, including this one. Andre's voice did not shake. His hands did not tremble. He held the printed disclosure page, page 11, highlighted in yellow, and his eyes never left Holt's face. My question is simple. How can you judge this case fairly when you profit from the verdict? Raymond Holt's face went white. The gavel did not come down. His hand was frozen above it. Sloan was standing, mouth open, with nothing to say. The clerk had stopped typing. Sutton was staring at the floor. The gallery was silent. Not the silence of shock, the silence of something shattering. Something that had held this town in its grip for 22 years, cracking right down the middle. A 24-year-old law student had just broken it with one question. Holt tried to regain control. He slammed the gavel once, twice, 3 times. This is outrageous. This is an unsubstantiated accusation made by an unlicensed student in my courtroom. The disclosure is a public record, Your Honor. Andre held up the printed page. Filed by you, signed by you, dated last February. Page 11. Sloan grabbed her phone and began scrolling frantically. Her fingers were shaking. The color drained from her face. She had never checked. In all her years working Crestfield cases in Holt's courtroom, she had never once looked at the judge's financial disclosures. No one had. Because no one had needed to. Because no one had ever dared. because no one had ever imagined that the answer to 22 years of injustice was sitting in a filing cabinet in the county clerk's office, waiting for someone to simply ask. A retired attorney in the gallery stood up. His voice was calm and clear. "Your Honor, if this disclosure is accurate, you are required by the South Carolina Code of Judicial Conduct to recuse yourself from this proceeding immediately. Failure to do so constitutes a violation of Canon 3E. And with respect, sir, everyone in this room just heard the evidence." Holt's gavel hand dropped to the bench. He looked out at the courtroom. 40 pairs of eyes staring back at him. Black faces, white faces. The bailiff who had barely glanced at Andre that morning. The clerk who had been recording every word. The attorneys who had dismissed him at the elevator. All of them seeing, for the first time, who Raymond Holt really was. He looked at Andre. The young man looked back at him. No hatred in his eyes. No triumph. No performance. Just the steady, quiet gaze of someone who had come to tell the truth and had done exactly that. Holt stood, his hands pressed flat against the bench. He did not speak for a long moment. The courtroom waited. Then he said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "This court is in recess indefinitely." He gathered his papers. He stepped down from the bench. He walked through the side door. He did not look back. He did not return. But here is what you need to know. What happened after that door closed was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of the reckoning. Within 48 hours, the Mercer County Clerk's office forwarded Andre's evidence, the financial disclosure, the 2 matching surveys, Sutton's testimony to the South Carolina Judicial Standards Commission. An emergency review was ordered. A replacement judge, the Honorable Carol Simmons, was brought in from Columbia and assigned to the Lewis case. Judge Simmons reviewed everything: the surveys, the offset, Sutton's admission, the disclosure, the pattern. Her ruling was swift and unambiguous. The boundary claim against the Lewis property was dismissed. The survey submitted by Crestfield Development was found to be unreliable and based on manipulated reference coordinates. Judge Simmons further recommended that the Dawson family's case be reopened for review, that Gerald Sutton's surveying license be referred to the State Licensing Board for investigation, and that Crestfield Development spending land acquisitions in Mercer County be referred to the State Attorney General. And Judge Raymond Holt, 22 years on the bench, untouchable, unquestioned, the most powerful name in the county, was formally suspended pending a full ethics investigation. When Judge Simmons read her decision, the courtroom was packed. Every seat taken. People standing along the walls. People standing in the hallway. Faces pressed against every window. She looked at Andre and said, "Mr. Lewis, I have been on the bench for 17 years. I have never, not once, seen a more thorough, more courageous, or more honest presentation in any courtroom in this state. You have done your father a great service. You have done this community a great service. And you have done this court and the law itself a great service." The gallery erupted, not in chaos, in applause, in tears, in something Mercer County had not felt in a very long time: justice. Keanu wrapped his arms around his son and held him so tight Andre's feet left the ground. He did not say anything. He could not. His tears said everything. Ruth was there, crying and laughing at the same time, the way only grandmothers can. The community surrounded them, hands on shoulders, arms around backs. Diane Foster stood in the doorway, smiling through tears. She did not bother to wipe. Andre opened the briefcase. He reached into the lining and pulled out a handwritten note on yellowed paper, the one that had been tucked there since before he was born. His grandfather's handwriting. "The law belongs to those who study it." He handed it to Ruth. She pressed it to her chest, closed her eyes, and whispered her husband's name. 3 generations. 1 briefcase. 1 truth. Now, about Raymond Holt. He did not go quietly. He hired 2 attorneys. He issued a public statement calling the proceedings politically motivated. He told a local reporter that he had done nothing wrong, and that his investment in Crestfield was a private matter that had no bearing on his judicial decisions. He doubled down. He denied everything. He refused, even as the evidence mounted, to say the 2 words that might have mattered. I am sorry. The South Carolina Judicial Standards Commission completed its investigation 14 months later. What they found was not a single conflict of interest. It was a pattern. Undisclosed financial relationships spanning 16 years. 11 cases involving Crestfield Development or affiliated entities. Every single one ruled in Crestfield's favor. Every single one involving black families on the south side of Mercer. The commission found that Holt had received not only investment returns but to direct payments totaling $47,000, routed through a shell company connected to Crestfield's parent corporation. Raymond Holt's law license was permanently revoked. He was ordered to pay restitution of $231,000 to families whose cases had been affected by his rulings. He was barred from serving in any judicial or legal capacity in the state of South Carolina for the remainder of his life. His name was removed from the courthouse plaque he had walked past every morning for 22 years. On the day the plaque came down, Holt stood in the parking lot of his attorney's office and watched the news report on his phone. He was alone. His wife had filed for divorce 3 months earlier. His 2 closest colleagues on the bench had stopped returning his calls. The politician connections that had protected him for 2 decades had quietly, efficiently, completely disappeared. He was 62 years old, and he had nothing left except the weight of what he had done. A reporter caught him outside the courthouse the day the final ruling was issued. She asked him if he had anything to say to the families whose cases he had decided while holding a financial interest in the opposing party. Holt stood in the afternoon light. He was smaller than he had looked on the bench. His shoulders were curved inward. His face had aged 10 years in 14 months. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I thought," he said finally, his voice barely carrying. "I thought I was untouchable. I thought the position protected me. I thought nobody would look." He stopped. His jaw worked. "I was wrong. I was wrong about all of it." It was the first honest thing Raymond Holt had said in 22 years. It was too late to matter to the families he had failed, but it was said, and it was recorded, and it would stand. Gerald Sutton's surveying license was revoked. Crestfield Development Group was placed under investigation by the South Carolina Attorney General. 14 property acquisitions across Mercer County were flagged for review. For families, including the Dawsons, filed motions to reclaim their land. Commissioner Dale Whitfield, the head of Crestfield's parent company and brother-in-law of a state senator, resigned from his position before charges were filed. The state senator did not seek re-election. And Andre Lewis passed the South Carolina bar examination for months after the hearing. He received his license on a Tuesday morning. He called his father from the parking lot of the testing center and said 2 words: "We won." Keanu Lewis repainted the garage sign that spring. He did it himself on a Sunday afternoon with Andre holding the ladder. The new sign was clean and bright. It read Keanu and Son's Garage, established 2005. Still standing. Still standing. I want to tell you something before we close. When I was growing up, I watched my uncle lose his hardware store. Not because he failed. Because someone with more money and a better lawyer decided they wanted his corner. He stood in the parking lot on the last day holding the keys. And he did not cry. He just said, "They do not take the building. They take the belief that you can keep anything." I never forgot that. I wrote this story because nobody wrote his. Because the world is full of people like Andre Lewis. Brilliant, prepared, determined people whose gifts are invisible because someone decided that the size of their wallet or the address on their lease disqualifies them from being taken seriously. Andre did not walk into that courtroom with money. He did not walk in with connections or a powerful firm behind him. He walked in with truth, with preparation, with a question that had been sitting in a public filing cabinet for years, waiting for someone with the courage to ask it. And that was enough. So look at the people around you. Really look, past the worn shoes, past the used car, past the absence of a business card with an impressive title. You have no idea what someone has studied. You have no idea what they are carrying. And you have absolutely no idea what they are capable of. The law belongs to those who study it. That was true in 1961 when a man was told He could not go to law school because of the color of his skin. It was true when his grandson carried his briefcase into a courthouse and asked one question that changed everything. And it is true today. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, hit that like button. It costs you nothing, but it helps the story reach someone who needs to hear it today. Share it. Send it to someone who has been underestimated, someone who has been told they are not enough, someone who has been looked at the way Holt looked at Andre and decided to stand up anyway. Subscribe and turn on notifications because next week we are telling another story you will not forget. And drop a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever walked into a room where nobody believed you belonged? What did you do? I read every single one.